Hey everyone, welcome to Lensflare.
Hi guys.
We are still working on our intro,
Yeah.
and none of you have sent one in yet. So you haven't had time to send one in. But somebody is working on an intro, and then you may or may not Cat
Being ridiculous.
But you'll probably still hear her doing ridiculous. So today we are talking, what do you do as a photographer to handle when you have to film? Obviously, you just should choose, if you have any control, if you have a vote, choose not to shoot when it's too bright.
What? Why?
Because when it's too bright, and I'm talking about like noon on a cloudless day, that is a perfect example of when it's too bright.
What do you mean? Like Las Vegas weather? That's every day here.
Yeah, I mean, this is not England. This is not San Francisco. This is not Seattle. Our normal everyday, day of the year is cloudless and bright. And honestly, it's not just noon. I mean, it's very bright the majority of the day.
Yeah.
That's what you should avoid. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes people say the only time if we want to do the photo shoot is between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on this day. And there's no clouds. Just like normally there's no clouds.
Because life happens, and that's all the only times that they can do the things, right?
Yeah. So as we always do, we're always going to talk about a particular photo shoot while we talk about solving the problem that is brought up from doing that shoot. And so in this case, we were invited to join kind of randomly.
It was last minute, right?
Yeah, it was super last minute. It was like, hey, do you want to be a second shooter on this shoot in a dry lake bed?
Pew, pew, pew.
They were dressed as Star Wars characters. They had a cool baby Yoda. What do you call that?
The carrier.
The carrier.
The little floaty thing.
The child.
That was before he was named.
Yeah, before he was named. And I still like him being called the child.
That's because you are a child.
So we were invited to this shoot. We didn't have a vote. And we could either say no because it's a crappy time of the day, or we could show up and make the best of it. And so we went and we did the shoot. We'll bring up the first photo. Now, obviously, I've done some composition. We didn't shoot it on an alien planet.
What?
But if you look at the ground, up to the clouds in the background, and the Jedi flying in air, doing a jump sword overhand cleave, that's all real. Like, that's all the way I shot it. And then the mountains are the way I shot it. It's just the sky. The sky is the only part I really changed for this shoot.
You're telling me that moon is not real?
No.
That makes me sad.
I know. It makes me sad. I can't wait till, we can go some other planet and see something like this, complete with some people with lightsabers. And that's probably not going to happen, but
probably
maybe,
not.
Who knows? People determine. People love lightsaber stuff. So if they can make a real one, they will make a real one, and people will die. Okay, so we drive out here, and there's so much dust, and it's so bright. And we have another shooter there, and he's shooting on automatic. And there's nothing wrong, guys, with shooting automatic. If you like to shoot automatic, if you just don't feel comfortable with manual, whatever, shoot automatic, make amazing art. Nothing wrong with that. I shoot manual most of the time, and it's not because I'm like trying to be a pretentious photographer or something. It's because I want to create the art that I want to create, and not the art that the camera wants to make for me. I love tools. I love technology. Now, the problem generally with automatic on a bright desert shoot like this is that what will happen is that the aperture is going to close. Now, the aperture acts like the pupil in your eyeball.
Okay.
So when you are standing out in the sun at noon in the desert,
Mm-hmm.
what do your pupils look like?
Probably really, really small.
Really small. So that, I mean, on one hand, your irises, like the color of your eyes will be there. Like that's it, because the pupils are going to be so tiny. But with a camera, when your aperture, which represents the pupil of your eyeball, when your aperture closes up to push out the light, right? It doesn't, it's, there's too much light going on and it'll just be white. You won't be able to see anything in the photo. So automatic will close up that aperture. And then once it gets small enough, finally, it'll be dark enough that, that it'll look normal. It'll still probably be bright. Honestly, it'll still be bright because it's so bright out there. But that's what the camera will choose to do because it's easy. It's the easiest way. You don't want so much light. It's too bright. Close up that aperture. And then the depth of field will be super intense. Everything will be in focus. And that's fine if you want your photos to look like a iPhone picture, like a camera phone picture. There won't be, to me, there won't be any beauty. There won't be any what they call bokeh. It's just going to be everything crisp in a boring way. And normally, I want it to look the way that things look to your real eyeballs, which is something's in focus. And here I'm the artist, so I get to choose what's in focus. And anything further behind it is blurry, and anything closer is blurry. And things that are further away are really, really blurry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the kind of look I normally want with my photography. And automatic won't do that. But the problem is that if you're going to keep your aperture relatively wide, which is going to create that bokeh, then you have to do something else to get rid of the light because it's going to be way too bright now. Now you've got the aperture wide. You're like forcing your pupils to stay wide in the camera. What you then do is you lower your ISO as small as it can go. Well, I mean, as small as it naturally can go. So I go to ISO 100. ISO 100 means you're not going to have any amplification by the camera sensors. So it's not going to have a bunch of noise. And that's what you want anyways. You always want to shoot with the ISO as low as possible because you don't want the little dots, the little noise in the photos, right? That's great. But even at ISO 100, if you have that aperture wide open at like 2.8 if it's two people, I like to go 1.8 if it's one person. And sometimes I like to go real crazy and go 1.4. Crazy.
Crazy.
If you're shooting what I would consider wide open for two people at 2. Then it's going to be way too bright even at ISO 100. So this is a pop quiz because I mean you're learning.
Am I?
Yeah, you are.
Nope, I don't know the answer.
So the triangle. So they describe exposure as a triangle.
Okay.
You have your aperture, you have your ISO, and what is the third thing? And you actually kind of know this, but because I'm putting on the spot, it's gonna be hard.
It is.
Shutter speed.
Shutter speed?
Shutter speed is the third thing you can change. So as you lower the shutter speed, what happens?
It's slower to blink.
Slower to blink, which allows more light in.
Mm-hmm.
It also allows you to do light trails. So if we do the shutter speed super, super low,
So like that's how you get the long exposure.
long exposure is saying that the shutter speed is really slow.
Ridiculously slow.
It could be, I mean, it depends on how long of an exposure, but sure, yeah.
Okay.
So the shutter speed, you can go up, and with a good camera, you can go really high up. And the faster your camera blinks,
Mm-hmm.
the less light that you have.
That's fair.
So, okay, great. So now you're out in the middle of the desert. You want to have it be wide open, 2.8, because you got two people, two Jedi fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got your ISO down to 100. And you've got your shutter speed up to like 5,000, 12,000, I don't know, something crazy, super high. Ridiculously, like only computers can do this. Okay, you take the photo and it's all perfectly exposed in the middle of the day in a hot Las Vegas desert. Okay. But is it fixed? And the answer is no. The answer is that it's not going to be fixed at that point. So let's look at another photo. Now, here we have Danny as a Sith. For people on the podcast, we're looking at Danny in a, what would you call this outfit? I think it's like I'm just wondering what it's really
I
named.
don't know, because Danny...
It's like a summer dress. It's like a goth summer dress.
She's such a witchy aesthetic kind of girl.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
So she is effectively like a Sith sorcerer.
Yes.
In this scenario, and in the Star Wars universes, there's people that have force powers that are not Jedi. They're not trained. They're not Sith. They're nothing like that. They just develop their powers and they do witchy things. So there's way more than the movies have. But obviously, you have to like read the books and read the comics, all that kind of stuff. So she's wearing this like kind of like goth summer dress, and we've got the child next to her. And she's got a lightsaber going on and whatever. But what you can kind of notice is that the shadows are really dark. Mm-hmm. The shadows are so dark that it is difficult to see a lot of her body. Now, in post, I've tried to lighten the shadows and lower the highlights as much as possible in a way that looks natural. Because when it's so bright, when the source of light is so intense, like the desert sun around noon, then the relative shadows are so far apart. Like they're so dark.
They're so
lacking light that
such a contrast, I guess.
Well, exactly. So when the bright part of the picture is so bright and the dark part of the picture is so dark, you have kind of two choices. You can either expose for the light side, which is going to leave the dark part shadowy, or you're going to expose for the shadowy part, which is going to leave the bright part like solid white. It'll just be way overexposed. So you try to bring these together, and it's frustrating because, for me, I like my pictures to come out relatively close to what I took out on the thing. I want to be able to look at it and know what I'm looking at there, like holding the camera. I want to be able to show people, hey, this is what the photo is kind of going to look like before I add special effects or whatever. But out there, we couldn't. It's so much. Now, how do you handle it? What were you doing?
What was I doing?
Yeah, because you were handling it, actually.
I had the reflector.
You had the reflector.
I had the reflector because I wanted some of the light to come to the dark side.
Yeah, there you go. So,
But yeah, the reflector helps with giving them the golden glow that we typically would want for golden hour.
Yeah. Now, we haven't talked about when would we like the photo shoot to be. And I think we'll talk about like perfect scenarios. Like if you have a vote, we'll talk about that like I think at the end of this episode. One, using a reflector allows you to fill in the darkest parts of the picture, which normally means you probably need a person. I have some large reflectors that I can clip into light stands, and it kind of works as long as there's no wind, because out in the middle of a dry lake bed, it's like a sail, and the wind will just gust through and it will pick up and yank that thing. And I've had people like they're struggling with their strength to hold on to the stupid thing. It's really frustrating. So it's better to just have somebody hold the reflector and not try to rely on just attaching it to a light stand or something. But you have a choice. Generally, for most reflectors, you can do a reflector with silver or a reflector with gold. I don't always choose gold, but what she was just talking about was adding some warmth. And that's another part of the problem. When it's so bright out there, what can happen is the colors can start to look faded. And if you saw like, what was the movie with, oh man, what's the movie with the guy from Fast and Furious? But he's an alien and he's like a criminal, but he has the eyes. Pitch Black?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you saw Pitch Black and you saw it during the daytime, they intentionally desaturated all the video at that time of day because they wanted to give that look that's true. When it's so super bright, we can't see a lot of color, but you use that reflector on the gold side and you reflect in some warmth, and it can just help feel like a little more organic and not so sterile, because that's what I kind of like. When it's super, super bright, it feels sterile, it feels cold, it feels emotionless, and it feels boring. And maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want it to be cold and mechanical. But in this case, Star Wars is bright and colorful, and there's so much going on. And even in the desert, I want it to be interesting. So that's your choice. Sometimes you want it to be silver because you don't want the unnatural warmth.
Oh no, it was called Riddick.
No.
No, wasn't Riddick?
So Riddick is that the third movie in the series?
Maybe.
So his name was Riddick.
Oh yeah. Was it the first one? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a trilogy. So the first one I think was Pitch Black. And then the second one was, I mean, I could be wrong, but
Into Pitch Black? Oh no, it was Pitch Black.
yeah,
you're right.
Don't challenge me. No, please challenge me, because I could have been totally wrong.
I'm like, wait, was it?
There was a video game. There was a second movie. And I think there was a third movie, or there was going to be a third movie. I'm not really sure. Using the gold side can make things look warmer, and that's super cool. But that's how you can kind of use the natural light and balance the shadows so that they don't just seem like either pitch black or everything else is too bright. It still gets hard. It's not perfect because you're not going to be able to shine onto everything. If this works fine, if you're a person, you can light up a person. But what if you have 3 people?
Oh, that's so hard.
It
3
sucks.
people?
It sucks. It really does.
Super sucks.
You also, this is where, like, now I might have done this a little bit differently. And I think this is kind of interesting. You can use flash during the day. We could, instead of using a reflector, we could have used a flash and maybe multiple flash. So in that scenario, you're using a flash, and that flash can't really compete with the sun easily, probably, depending on the power of the flash, whatever. But what you can do is you can fill in the shadow in different ways. You could have 2 flash, you could have 3 flash, you could have 1 flash per person. You could have 1 flash per person and then a wide flash for like behind them on the shadowy side. There's all kinds of different things. What I don't think you should do, regardless of your choice, I don't think you should leave the camera on fully on automatic, because fully automatic during this hard brightness kind of scenario that I'm talking about, where you're in the middle of the day, I just don't think you're going to be happy with the results. And you're going to kind of be wondering, like, why don't my photos look like Richard's? Or why don't my photos look like somebody else? It's fine. I mean, you honestly can get some decent things with automatic or whatever, and you could probably change your automatic. Like if you switch to aperture mode, so you could switch to aperture mode, and that's semi-automatic. You're now locking in the aperture and you're letting the shutter speed go to whatever. Now that's some of its own problems. If you leave the shutter speed at 5,000 or something, then things get like locked in place. So if you threw a handful of dust up in the air and then took a photo, every piece of dust would just be frozen in space. That can look cool sometimes. But what if you want a motion blur? What if you don't want each grain of dust to be standalone? You want it to be smeary. What if you want it to look like there's a little bit of blur because they're spinning a baton or spinning a lightsaber or something, and you want that blur? You can't do that if it's locked in place with a 2,000 shutter speed. So then you're going back to, okay, you're going to change your shutter speed down to something lower that has some motion blur, like maybe 160. You're still going to keep that aperture wide open. You're going to keep that aperture at 2.8. You're going to have your ISO at 100. Well, that's the triangle. That's the triangle. There's nothing else to adjust. Well, use the powers of God and make it darker. Or the powers of mankind and put some sunglasses on your camera. And that's what you do. That's what an indy filter is. So if you haven't worked with indy filters, or you wonder, like, why do I need an indy filter? Well, an indy filter is just sunglasses for your camera, and that will make it darker. And so you can keep your shutter speed low or lowish, however low you want. And you can keep your aperture wide open, and you can keep your ISO low, which is, you're shooting outside, you're going to keep your ISO low no matter what. And that's it. Indy filters. Most photographers, when they're just starting, they might buy indy filters, but they don't know what to do with them. And then they stop using them, and then they stop bringing them. And then you're the cool guy who still brings your indy filter out into the desert. You put it on, and now you've made it darker, and you can still have that cool blur if you want. If you want. Sometimes you might like people just being locked in place. You can see in this photo, he is locked in place. That's because the shutter speed is super high. So that's super cool. Let's go ahead and we're going to talk on another episode about the best times of day, and maybe a little bit in the bonus cast. But let's just kind of go through these photos. So you really like this photo. So
I did. I like that photo a lot.
Can you describe this photo for the podcast?
So basically, our friend Stefan, he has his back towards us and his arm is down with his saber. And I like the view. So, you know, you can see men in the background and they're about to fight.
I think I call this the duel.
The duel.
Yeah. I really like to create framing where we can see something inside or in between something that's visible on the camera. So yeah, I love being able to see Min's face on the upper right hand of the photo, and then Stefan's arm cutting down the middle, forming a triangle.
There's so many triangles here.
Yeah, there's so many.
So many.
Yeah.
But it's appealing to the eye. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, there's a triangle between his arm and Min's face.
There's also a triangle between his arm and the lightsaber.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yep. It's like triangle within triangle within triangle.
All
I
the,
really like
all the
this.
triangles. I think we should call this the triangle episode.
The triangle episode.
What's so special about triangles?
Baby Yoda again.
I love me some Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda, baby Yoda.
It doesn't make any sense to call him Baby Yoda because
What?
it's
Who
not
wants-
Yoda as a baby.
Listen, I'm not gonna sing a song about Grogu.
But also, I think the species of Yoda is still unnamed. So this is Disney's fault. Like, they didn't name the species. It wasn't like Yoda is a Vertigan or something, because their names are super garbage, boring. Like, and so like a Vertigan, you'd be like, oh, they're green.
Terrible.
Hire me, Disney. I
Dora.
can name things for you.
No, Dora, you're not allowed to think of names.
But they're come on. The Mon Calamari. They're squid heads.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So Baby Yoda floating. There's actually Danny holding Baby Yoda. I just cut her out in the photo.
Photoshop magic.
I really like this one. So here I did recolor the ground. Obviously,
It looks so cool.
yeah, I just wanted it to look like an alien planet. I really wanted this to look unique and different. And he's a Jedi. He doesn't use lightning. So whatever he's doing with his hands, I can't visually show it. Not really, not in any way that's true to the spirit of the Jedi. So I didn't have him do, I mean, I could have put him like something floating, but he's looking at the camera. And if anybody's floating, the
It's
audience
you.
is. Yeah, it's you. It's you. Exactly. So instead, I have, the ship crashed behind him, like he came out of it. And there's like other stuff. And he's probably using some telekinesis or whatever to the Force.
Must protect everybody else.
Yeah. So this is just a little bit. I hope this helped people to understand what they might be seeing when they look at some photos that were taken out in the middle of the day. And they're like, I don't know why I don't like it, but I don't like it. And hopefully I gave you some tips, some ideas on how you can overcome it. And then we talked about Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda is the shit.
In the bonus cast for our Patreon members, we'll go ahead and continue talking about the shoot a little bit, and probably a little bit more specifically about this shoot and how we did it, and some of my editing decisions. Meanwhile, everyone else, have a good day. Talk to you later. Click like, subscribe,
Thanks for stopping by.
ring the bell.
You can ring my bell. Ring my bell.
Help us come up with an intro. And bye, guys.
Bye.